Afghanistan means land of the Afghans. Wow, amazing. But what does Afghan mean? Well, it's an old Persian word for the Iranian Pashtun people, but the actual word may derive from the Sanskrit Azvakan, meaning horsemen. Others think it comes from the Avestan word Awajan, meaning killing. Albania comes from the Albani, an ancient Illyrian tribe. It has been suggested the word came from the pre-Indo-European noun alb, meaning mountain or hill, which might also be the origin of the word Alps. The modern Albanian word for the country pertains to the eagle, a common royal symbol in medieval Albania. Algeria's name comes from its capital city, and it means the islands in Arabic, because of a few little rocky islands off the city's coast. The ancient name of the city meant 20, because it was believed 20 buddies of Hercules founded the settlement. Andorra's name origin isn't certain, but it may derive from an ancient tribe, the Andosini, mentioned by Polybius, and this word may come from the Basque, Handia, meaning big. Yes, that sounds about right. Angola derives from the term for the title of the kings who used to rule there, in the kingdom of Ndongo. Okay, next, Antigua. It means ancient in Spanish, perhaps named by Columbus after a chapel image in Seville. The native Arawak name for the island, Waladli, meant our own. Barbuda means bearded, perhaps after the facial hair of the natives, or the bearded fig trees of the island. Argentina comes from the Italian word for silver, due to an association with a myth about a great mountain of silver that was believed to exist on the continent. The word Armenia is first attested to in the ancient inscription of Achaemenid Persian king Darius I, and it might be linked to the Indo-European root Ar, which means to assemble, but no one actually knows. The native Armenian name for the land is believed to derive from that of their legendary patriarch. Others say the Hittites. Others are people mentioned by the Hittites who lived in Armenia. The word might again be linked to the Proto-Indo-European word for metal, making Armenia the land of metal. Aruba gets its name from a native Arawak word meaning well-positioned island. The Kalinago name for it was Shell Island. Australia comes from the Latin word for southern, from the phrase Terra Australis Incognita, unknown southern land. Since ancient times, people had speculated that a continent had to be where Australia was, and then they found it, and one day, this mighty building was constructed there. And you thought this was impressive. Austria comes from the Old German for Eastern Kingdom, or Eastern Realm. Azerbaijan's name comes from an ancient Persian governor or satrap called Atrapates, which means protected by fire, a reference to the sacred fire of the Zoroastrian religion. The Bahamas comes from the native Taino language and means large upper middle island, in reference to the large upper middle island. Bahrain means the two seas, though no one knows exactly which two seas it originally referred to. Bangladesh means land of Bengal, but the Bangla bit probably derives from the ancient Bongo kingdom, which the southern Indian Chola dynasty referred to as Bangladesha. But what the word actually means is unknown, though it might have originated from the ancient Austronesian sun god, Bonga. Barbados, like Barbuda, comes from the word for beard, in either Portuguese or Spanish, and again might refer to the hanging roots of the bearded fig tree. Belarus means White Russia. We'll address what Russia means under Russia, but here we'll just note that there are several theories as to why it was called Belarus or White Russia, one of them arguing that it was meant to distinguish it from Black Rus or Black Ruthenia, which was pagan, unlike the Christian White Rus or Belarus. Others think the white meant that it was part of the land not conquered by the invading Golden Horde. One Renaissance historian noted the divisions of Rus. White Ruthenia was under the rule of Moscow, Black Ruthenia was under Polish rule, but according to this 1459 map, White Rus was simply named so because it was near the White Sea, Black Rus because it was near a river called Black, and yet the map places Belarus all the way over here, so I don't know what's going on. Belgium is named after the Celtic tribe who historically dwelt there, and the word appears to derive from a Proto-Celtic root meaning to swell up with fury, a reference to either their warrior culture or football fans. Belize may come from the Mayan Bel Itza, which means the way to Itza. But what does Itza mean?
It's me, Mario!
No. Some suggest the word means enchanter of the water, or enchanted or magical water. Benin is named after the old kingdom of Benin, and the word may come from the Edo adjective ubini, livable, or perhaps the Yoruba word for anger. Bhutan's name origin is not certain, but probably derives from the Sanskrit Bhota Anta, meaning end of Tibet, the edge of and final geographical spot where Tibetan culture is to be found. Bolivia's name comes from the great general Simón Bolívar. The name Bolivar is of Basque origin and means Windmill Valley. Here's its namesake, a village in Spain. But hey, where are the windmills? Ah, another double. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia is named after the Bosna River, and according to one philologist, the word could derive from the Illyrian basanas, which is linked to a Proto-Indo-European word which means the running water. Running water. So, like a river. It's a river called river. Moving on, Herzegovina just means Herzog's land. Now, who's Herzog and why is it his land? Here he is. Herzog is the German word for duke, and this Bosnian nobleman beduked himself and the name stuck. Botswana means land of the Tswana, the Tswana people. Some people suggest the word Tswana relates to the word tswa, to go out, perhaps referencing an ancient departure or splitting off point from another group. It isn't known or certain. This person on Facebook said it comes from the word Tswana, meaning alike. Brazil is most likely named for the Brazilwood tree. Its prized timber was a major export of the colonial Portuguese. The word Brazil derives from the Portuguese word for ember, referencing the reddish color of the wood. The native Guarani people referred to the land as Pindorama, which meant the land of the palm trees. The original Portuguese name for the country was Land of the Holy Cross. Wood again, trees and wood. Well, after Russia, Brazil does indeed have the most trees in the world. The word Brunei may come from the Sanskrit for seafarers, but the popular legend holds that it comes from a sultan around the year 1400 who was looking for a good spot to move, and when he found the right place he said Baruna, meaning there or that's it. Bulgaria comes from the name of the Bulgar people, a nomadic warrior Turkic tribe. The word may derive from the Proto-Turkic root Bulgar, meaning to mix or become mixed, and while the Bulgars who settled in Eastern Europe mingled with populations there and became Slavicized, were they already mixed before their incursion? Others suggest the whole mixing may refer to stirring up, inciting, causing disturbance, etc. There's many other theories, including a possible Latin origin for the mercenaries manning forts in border regions. Burkina Faso. Well, Burkina means honest or upright, and Faso means fatherland. The common translation renders it as land of the honest men. Burundi gets its name from a word meaning another one, but I don't know what that other one is. And speaking of which, here's another country. Cambodia is the English rendition of the French form of the Khmer word Kampuchea, which comes from the Sanskrit name Kambodja, and that means the land of Kambu, who was a Hindu sage. He is linked with the Iranian people group known as the Kambodjas, which some have linked to the ancient Persian kings known as Cambyses. Oh, and no one knows what it means. Cameroon's name comes from the title Portuguese explorers attached to a river there, which they called River of Prawns, because of all the ghost shrimp they found there. Canada comes from a native Iroquoian word meaning village. That's a pretty big village. Cape Verde means green cape and originated from what Portuguese explorers named this peninsula all the way over here in Senegal, and which was later appended to these islands for some reason. Central African Republic means Central African Republic. Chad is named after Lake Chad, and Chad comes from a Kanuri word meaning lake. Chile is tricky because no one really knows. It could derive from a Mapuche word Chile, meaning the place where the land ends, or the Quechua word for snow, Chile. But there's several other theories and it just isn't certain. But if it really is from the word Chile, that would mean all those mispronunciations of Chile were actually correct. China. The word may derive from the Qin dynasty, China's first imperial dynasty, and the word Qin is formed of a compound of characters showing hands holding a pestle, crushing grains, a reference to the Qin state's rural heritage, a land prized for raising horses. It was poor and backwards for a long time before its rise to power during the Warring States period. Colombia is named after the navigator Christopher Columbus, and Columbus means dove. Comoros is popularly believed to be named after the Arabic word for the moon, but another view holds that it is simply named from an old Arabic name for Madagascar. Both of the Congo countries are named after the Congo River, which is named after the Congo people, and the word itself is believed to refer to a tribal assembly or gathering. The DRC's earlier name of Zaire came from the Congo word for river. Costa Rica means rich coast. Croatia's name, Hrvat in the Proto-Slavic, is of uncertain origin, but some point to this ancient Greek tablet from a Greek colony in what's now Russia. It mentions the name of Choroathos, which may have been of Scythian, Sarmatian, Iranian origin. The name means guardian. Early Croats might have been an Iranian tribe, possibly with some Crimean Gothic admixture, who later on became Slavicized. Or they might have been Slavs under Iranian rule. Or this might all be nonsense. The evidence is admittedly rather flimsy. Cuba's name is thought to come from the Taino, where it can basically be translated as nice place, or place where there is lots of fertile land. The name of Cyprus is extremely ancient, first appearing in Mycenaean Greek inscriptions from the 15th century BC. The meaning is unknown, but theories include a non-Indo-European word for copper because of all the copper ore on the island, or the Greek name for cypress tree, or the henna tree. Czech Republic or Czechia. The word Czech is from a legendary patriarch figure, and the name is believed to derive from a Proto-Slavic root which basically means a member of the people. The older name for a chunk of land was Bohemia, Latin for home of the boy.
Yeah, boy.
A Celtic tribe. There are two possible definitions for this Celtic word boy. It can mean warrior people or herding people, and since Polybius mentions them involved in both cattle raising and war, both can be assumed as correct in any case. The name for another chunk of the land was Moravia, and that comes from the Germanic word for borderland. The name of Denmark is not certain as to its origin, but it is commonly explained as coming from a combination of a Germanic word indicating flat land and mark, meaning borderland or forest. Djibouti's name is even vaguer, but some link it to a word meaning plateau. Others suggest it is the land of Tehuti, or the land of Thoth, the Egyptian ibis-headed god of wisdom and the moon. Dominica is the Latin word for Sunday. The native name meant her body is tall, and I'm sure it was. The Dominican Republic, however, is named after St. Dominic, and Dominic in Latin means belonging to the Lord, meaning God. Ecuador means equator in Spanish. Egypt's name, as we know it, derives from the Greek name for it, Aegyptos, which according to Strabo meant below the Aegean, but it is more commonly believed to derive from the Egyptian term for the city of Memphis, which meant temple of the Ka of Ptah. The Egyptians believed the soul to be made up of multiple parts, and the Ka was its life force, its vital essence. Ptah was a creator god and the patron of craftsmen. In any case, the ancient Egyptians themselves called their country Kemet, meaning black land, referencing the rich soil on the banks of the Nile that sustained them. El Salvador means the Saviour in reference to Jesus Christ. Equatorial Guinea's name refers to a portion of the African region of Guinea and its proximity to the equator. The word Guinea possibly comes from a Berber term for the darkness of the skin of the region's inhabitants. Others link it to the great commercial city of Mali called Djenné, but it isn't really known for sure. Eritrea comes from the ancient Greek word for red in reference to the Erythraean Sea, the Red Sea. Estonia comes from the ancient Baltic tribe, the Aisti, first mentioned by the Roman historian Tacitus. As for what Aisti means, no one knows. It might be a Baltic word for field, it might be from the Germanic word for east, or the word for respect, no one knows. Eswatini means land of the Swazis or Swati. It used to be called Swaziland, and the word comes from the name of a king, Mswati II. And what does Mswati mean? I couldn't find out. Ethiopia comes from an ancient Greek compound of two words that referred to the darkness of the skin of the land's inhabitants. It was applied generally to the land below Egypt, however, not to the modern nation of Ethiopia, but tradition holds that the country is named after an ancient king, the son of Cush, who was the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. In any case, Ethiopia was once the home of the Aksum Empire, and some scholars believe that Aksum is from a Semitic root pertaining to greenery and grassiness. After King Ezana of Aksum conquered Nubia, the original Ethiopia, the name was adopted by the Kingdom of Aksum, and remains fixed to it still. Fiji stems from the Tongan name for Fiji's largest island, whose name, according to Wiktionary, springs from the old Proto-Central Pacific word for east or sunrise. Finland's name is a bit of a mystery. The word Finn is believed to be Germanic and might derive from the word vende, wanderer, or perhaps the Old Norse word Finn for hunter-gatherer, perhaps originally a description of the Sami people, which sounds a lot like Suomi, the Finnish word for Finland, but this word may instead derive from an old Baltic word for land. France is named after the Franks, a Germanic people who conquered it after the decline and fall of Rome. The original definition of Frank is uncertain. It might have derived from the word for a type of spear they used. Others argue it came from the Proto-Germanic word for fierce. In time, however, the word entered into Latin and meant free. The earlier name for France, when it was Celtic, was Gaul, and this name may derive from the Celtic word for power or might. Gabon gets its name from the Portuguese word for a sort of hooded cloak, which explorers thought the estuary of the Como River resembled. Gambia is named for the Mandinka word for the Gambia River, and perhaps derives from the gamba, a drum made from the calabash gourd that was beaten upon the occasion of the death of one of the elders. Georgia's name is popularly associated with St. George, but may ultimately derive from a Persian term, meaning the land of wolves. The native name for the nation is traditionally believed to stem from a legendary patriarch, though one Georgian scholar argued that it derived from a word meaning some sort of enclosure. Germany comes from the Latin name Germania, which the Romans gave to the lands beyond the Rhine. The name might have come from the Celtic words for neighbour or battle cry, but no one really knows. The German word for Germany, Deutschland, ultimately comes from the old German word for Volk, people, land of the people. Makes sense? Ghana is believed to derive from the Soninke language and to mean warrior king, based on the rulers of the Ghana Empire. Europeans in the colonial era called the region the Gold Coast because of all the gold there. The name Greece is derived from the Hellenic tribe known as the Grecians, who established colonies in Sicily and whose name the Latin peoples of Italy would apply to all Hellenes, which was the name the Greeks called themselves. To confuse things a little more, the Parian Chronicle declares that the Hellenes originally referred to themselves as Grecians. This word may derive from Proto-Indo-European terms designating agedness, so even in ancient times Greek history was old. Now, the Greek name for Greece, Ellada or Hellas, is believed to derive from the mythological figure of Hellen, the son of Deucalion, who is the Noah figure in Greek legend. The name may have a meaning based on ideas of brightness and shining, along with the similar sounding Helios, god of the sun. A few other theories are here. Greenland means what it says, but not really. It was named by the Norwegian explorer Eric the Red, who gave it a nice name in the hopes of attracting settlers. By the way, just as a note, its current population is under 60,000. Grenada is probably named after the Spanish city of Granada, and that word might come from the Latin for seed or reddish color. Guatemala comes from a Nahuatl word meaning place of many trees. Guinea, as noted earlier, possibly derives from a Berber term for people with darker skin, and was later used by the Portuguese as a general term for the peoples living below the Senegal River. Guinea-Bissau. No one knows exactly what Bissau means, but it might have derived from the plural form of a local tribe. Guyana stems from an indigenous phrase meaning land of many waters. Haiti derives from the Taino language and means land of the high mountains. Honduras comes from the Spanish for depths and may have originated in a remark by Columbus about the waters on the coast. Hungary stems from the Latin name borrowed from the Greek name, borrowed from the Bulgar name for a confederation of Turkic clans who inhabited the Pontic-Caspian steppe and Volga regions in the 5th to 7th centuries, and the word literally means 10 tribes. But the name by which Hungarians refer to themselves, Magyar, comes from another part of their ethnogenesis, an old word for one of the tribes who gradually migrated out of Siberia and into Europe. The word possibly derives from the Proto-Ugric root for man or person. The Hun part of the English name for Hungary does indeed derive from the historical association of the land with the Huns, who invaded it in the 4th century. The origin of the word Hun, of course, is disputed. Some link it to Turkic words to do with growth or ferocity, others to Iranian words for skillfulness. The Huns are considered by some to be linked to the northern horse-riding invaders of ancient China, whom the Chinese called Xiongnu, meaning fierce slaves. Meanwhile, back in Europe, much of the land of modern Hungary was known, in Roman times, as Pannonia. The Pannonians were Illyrians, and their name might derive from a Proto-Indo-European root associated with water and marshland. Hong Kong is believed to have received its name from the Cantonese for incense or fragrant, and harbour, fragrant harbour. Iceland means Iceland. It was named by a Norseman who sailed there in the 9th century and who, according to the account of his adventures, was hiking on a mountain near his camp, saw a whole lot of ice and decided to name the entire island after it. This was a huge change of name from what the first person who named the island called it. He called it Snowland. The name of India, as we know it in English, comes from the Latin and earlier Greek names for the land that the Persians called Hindush, which derived from the Sanskrit Sindhu, which meant river, the Indus River. Indus meaning anything from river to flood to stream to ocean. The Indian name for India, Bharat, stems from an Indo-Aryan Vedic tribe, and the word comes from a Sanskrit root which means to carry, possessing the overall sense of maintaining or upholding. It was also a name of the Hindu god of fire Agni. Some more definitions are to be found here. Indonesia's name comes from two Greek words, Indos and Nessos, meaning Indian islands. As for major Indonesian island names, the name of Java may derive from the Sanskrit meaning Bali Island, an island where barley was grown. And speaking of barley, here's Bali, which might come from the Sanskrit for Island of Offerings, or the Sanskrit for Island of Waves. Sulawesi may derive from the Bugis word meaning Iron Island. Sumatra may derive from the Sanskrit for ocean, but was earlier known as the Island of Gold. Borneo is linked to the name Brunei, but it may derive from the Sanskrit for water, an indigenous name for the island, referred to people who ate sago, the starchy extract from certain palm trees. Lombok comes from the Sasak word for direct, honest, and straight. The name Iran comes from the Middle Persian word Iran, land of the Aryans. The Aryans, or Indo-Aryans, were an ancient tribe who migrated over a vast expanse of Eurasia, but what the word itself means is uncertain. While it later assumed the definition of noble, it appears to have originally been an ethno-cultural word, a sort of in-group tribal exclusivist identifier, for there was also a term for non-Aryans. The word Ar has been extensively analysed and theorised about, but there's no consensus as to its meaning. Some have suggested it means to wander, others have found it to have to do do with friendship, agriculture, or hospitality. Before moving on, however, we should also address the name of Persia. Historically, Persian and Iranian were not synonymous. There were many Iranian peoples, and the Persians were simply one of them. The word derives from the name for the Persian people, Parsa, and this demonym's meaning is really not known. It may be related to the Sanskrit words for axe, or the Proto-Iranian for rib. Now, ribs are curved like sickles, and a similar sounding word means rib and sickle in Sanskrit. In this article, I learned that the Assyrians referred to a place in what's now Iran as Parase, land of horses, originally ruled by the Sumerians. The Iranians who migrated into this region may have simply adopted this name and applied it to themselves. Iraq's name may come from the Middle Persian word for lowlands, but I like the theory that points to an origin from the word of Uruk, the ancient Sumerian city on the Euphrates, the city of Gilgamesh. Its name in Sumerian was Unug and meant dwelling or fortress or even jewelry. Ireland's name comes from the name of a goddess in Irish mythology, Eru, a name that stems from a Proto-Celtic word meaning fertile land. It is rather green, isn't it? The ancient Greek name for Ireland also referenced the goddess Eru, but the Romans changed the letters to make it Hibernia, which meant land of winter. The name origin of Israel is provided for us very tidily in the book of Genesis in the Bible. Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, during a night of inner torment, literally wrestles with an angel until the break of day. This angel is described as both a human and God, and the angel, who never reveals his identity, bestows a new name upon Jacob, Israel, which means to struggle with God. The earlier name for the land, Canaan, may come from the Semitic root meaning low, humbled, subjugated, or perhaps simply lowlands, though this fellow here argued the name might have derived from the Hurrian word for purple, referencing the purple dye industry of the region. Italy's name origin, according to one tradition, says it's named after Italus, a legendary king of the Enotrians in what's now Calabria. Another links the name with the Latin word for bull calf, or the similar word for calf in the extinct Oscan and Umbrian languages, the land of calves, perhaps simply referring to good grazing land for cattle, perhaps referring to a religious association. This bull calf origin for the name seems the most likely explanation to me, especially given the fact that ancient coins featuring the personification of Italia as a goddess use both the word Italia and the Oscan calf word Vitellu. There's also the fact that this southern region of Calabria, first known as Italy, had so many towns and settlements with names pertaining to bulls and cows. The Ivory Coast got its name from the Portuguese, who named different parts of West Africa according to their most valuable exports, and this one was the ivory one. Jamaica comes from a Taino phrase meaning land of wood and water. Jamaicans themselves refer to their country as yard, meaning yard or home. The word Japan does not come from Japan. Portuguese merchant sailors in the 16th century picked up the name from the Malay regions of Southeast Asia, who called it Japang or Jipang or Japan. This was likely a rendition of a Wu or Mandarin Chinese word for Japan, which meant sun origin. Marco Polo had recorded a version of this name for Japan around the year 1300. The Japanese names for Japan, Nippon or Nihon, mean the same thing as that old Chinese title, the origin of the sun, and it is famously translated into English as land of the rising sun. Jordan is named for the Jordan River, and the word probably derives from the Hebrew yarad, which means descent downward, referring to the direction of the river's flow, down to the Dead Sea. Kazakhstan, land of the Kazakhs. This word may derive from the Turkic root meaning to wander, reflecting the wandering nomadic lifestyle of the Kazakhs of old. Kenya is named after Mount Kenya, a word which comes from a phrase in the Kikuyu language meaning the mountain with brightness. Kiribati, and yes, it's pronounced that way, is the native Austronesian rendition of the name Gilbert, after the British captain Thomas Gilbert. The name Gilbert is from Old High German and translates to bright pledge or bright will. The name of Kosovo stems from a shortened version of a Slavic phrase meaning field of the blackbird. It is theorized the ancient name for the region, Dardania, came from an Albanian word for pear. Kuwait comes from an Arabic word meaning a fortress on the water. Kyrgyzstan, land of the Kyrgyz, a Turkic word meaning we are 40, referring to the legendary 40 tribes of the hero Manas, who united them. Laos is named for its people, the Lao, whose name may derive from the Austroasiatic root for human being. Latvia is possibly named after the ancient Baltic tribe, the Latgalians. Maybe there's a link to the name with the Old High German word for people, maybe not. This random article I found says Latvia comes from the word Latvis, meaning forest clearer. Anyway, it was once part of a region called Livonia, which was a Latin rendering of the Estonian word for sand. Lebanon is named after Mount Lebanon, which comes from a Phoenician root meaning white, probably referencing the snow. Lesotho is named after the Sutu people, a term that is believed to derive from the word for brown. Liberia comes from the Latin word for free, referencing the country's founding as a place of resettlement for freed slaves from the Americas. Libya derives from the Egyptian name for the Berber people living to their west, the Libu or Ribu. As for what that word actually meant, no one seems to know. An earlier Egyptian name for Libya apparently meant to gleam. Liechtenstein gets its name from the royal family who rule the region, a compound of Germanic words meaning bright or light and stone, bright stone. Lithuania's name is from an old Lithuanian word which might have derived from this stream and the verb to spill, so it might be a hydronym, a word for a body of water, but others disagree and argue instead for the name of the Lithuanian military elite. Luxembourg comes from a compound of ancient Germanic words and basically means little castle. Yeah, there's a lot of money in that little castle. Macau's spelling is Portuguese, but the word derives from a Chinese sea goddess whose name means mother ancestor. Madagascar's name origin is not known, some arguing for a link to the word Malay, referencing the origin of the native inhabitants. Others say it was a corrupted spelling of Mogadishu, and Marco Polo is the one blamed for this blunder. Malawi is the Chichewa and Chitumbuka word for flames. Malaysia means land of the Malays. The name, according to the 17th century Malay annals, derived from a river in Sumatra, the word meaning to accelerate, in reference to the current of the river. The Maldives is believed to be named after the capital city, which in Sanskrit means garland, and the Sanskrit word for island, Garland Island. Mali is named after the Mali Empire, and may come from a Mande word for hippopotamus, and there is indeed a myth about the empire's first ruler transforming into a hippo. Malta comes from an ancient Greek word meliti, perhaps deriving from the word for honey, in reference to Malta's native honeybees, whose produce would have been a valuable export. It might also derive from the Phoenician word for port. The Marshall Islands is named after British captain John Marshall. The name Marshall is of Middle English derivation, which basically means a groom for horses. The Spanish had earlier named the islands Los Pintados, the painted ones, after the tattooed natives. Mauritania originated as an exonym, the word by which the Greeks and Romans referred to the Maori Berber people, which is also where the word Moor comes from. The word may originally have been from the Phoenician Mahurin, meaning westerners. Mauritius is named after Dutch Prince Maurice of Orange. Mexico is named after a region of the Aztec Empire whose people were called the Mexica. The origin of this word is ambiguous, some pointing to the Nahuatl for place in the navel of the moon, or place in the middle of the century plant. In any case, the native term for the landmass that is now called Mexico meant land surrounded by water. Micronesia comes from the Greek for small island. The Micronesian island where the capital is located comes from a native word meaning upon a stone altar. Moldova is named after the Moldova River. The origin of the name is believed to spring from a legend about a prince whose dog, named Molda, drowned in the river while he was hunting. The origin of this word itself may be from the Old Slavic for spruce or fir tree. Others point to another word meaning soft or young. Monaco may have come from an older Ligurian name, but it is commonly believed to stem from the Greek for single house or solitary house. Now, Heracles or Hercules was, according to Strabo, himself known as the solitary one, and there was a temple to Hercules in the region. Mongolia, land of the Mongols. Okay, but what does Mongol mean? Well, it is believed to derive from the name of a legendary warrior chieftain, the name apparently given to him whilst enslaved by his enemies, and which meant bald-headed. Montenegro means Black Mountain. It is the Venetian translation of the Montenegrin term, which means the same thing. Here is the mountain, which in older days would have looked a lot darker because it would have been completely covered in trees. Our English word for Morocco comes from the Spanish name for the city of Marrakesh. What this word means is debated, some saying it comes from the Berber words meaning land of God. Others argue it originally meant country of the sons of Cush. Kesh, Cush, Kesh. It's feasible. Cush in the Bible is associated with Africa. In any case, the modern name of Morocco in Arabic means land of the sunset or land of the west. Mozambique is named after the island of that name, which received its name from an Arab trader operating there. Myanmar and its older name Burma both spring from the same word for the Burmese people and may come from the Sanskrit for land of Brahma. Namibia is named after the Namib Desert. The word is of Khoi origin and means vast place. Nauru may derive from the native word which means I go to the beach. And I mean, why wouldn't you? That's gotta be one of my favorite country name meanings so far. Nepal's name is a mystery. There's no doubt of its antiquity, but the meaning is unknown. Some link it to the name of an ancient Hindu sage. This Norwegian scholar argued that it was derived from a compound of words, together meaning house at the foot of the mountain. Some argue for a Tibetan-Burman origin, meaning cowherd. The Netherlands means lower countries or low-lying countries, which is geographically accurate. The Dutch region of Holland is sometimes used to refer to the Netherlands as a whole, and it derives from an old Dutch word for woodland. New Zealand was named by a Dutch explorer in 1643 after a province of the Netherlands, the name of which means sea land. The Maori name for the country is commonly translated as Land of the Long White Cloud, but in truth, historically, the Maori had several names for the country's two major islands, such as the Fish of Maui for the North Island and the Waters of Greenstone for the South Island. Nicaragua is most likely named after the native Nicarao people's term for a western region which meant surrounded by water. Both Niger and Nigeria are named after the Niger River. While Niger is the Latin word for dark or black, the river may instead have gotten its name from a phrase in the Tuareg language meaning river of rivers. North Korea's name comes from the ancient Korean kingdom of Goguryeo, a word which meant high castle or fortress, but over time it was shortened to mean high and beautiful. North Korea today calls itself a democratic people's republic, but exactly how valid its claims to democracy are is up for debate. Debate outside North Korea, that is. The North Korean name for their country derives from two earlier Korean kingdoms, their name apparently stemming from a Chinese term meaning land of the dawn or land of morning calm. North Macedonia. Ignoring for a moment the whole name dispute thing, the name Macedonia comes from the ancient kingdom, whose name was derived from the ancient Greek adjective from the root of makros, meaning tall or high, perhaps meaning people who were themselves tall or simply highlanders. Norway, as we know it, comes from the Old English word meaning north way, or the way to the north. Norway's two names for itself have to do with north, and derive from the Proto-Germanic word for north, though there are alternate arguments pushing for the meaning narrow way. Oman may derive from the Arabic meaning settled as opposed to the wandering people, the Bedouin. Pakistan's name was coined in 1931 and it means land of the pure. Palau may be named after the Malay word for island, but the word in the Palauan language means village. Palestine. The immediate derivation of this word comes from the Greek term for the Philistines, who themselves may have been a Greek people from the Aegean, and have also been linked to the mysterious sea peoples, who wrought such immense havoc in the Mediterranean during the Bronze Age collapse. Indeed, one group of the sea peoples mentioned in Egyptian records was called Peleset. Interesting. The word Philistine may derive from the Greek for clan or tribe, and the second part of the word may derive from the word for hearth or fireplace. Some others believe there may be a Hittite connection. Anyway, the Philistines were the arch enemy of Israel in the Bible, and judging from recent history, not much has changed. Panama's name is also of uncertain derivation. Some say it meant abundance of fish and referred to a fishing village. Others say it is from an indigenous word meaning far away. Some say it was a term in an extinct language that meant many butterflies, and others just say it is named after this tree. Papua New Guinea. As we've mentioned before, Guinea comes from a term referring to dark skin that the Portuguese picked up from the Berbers. But what about Papua? No one knows. Some say it was a Malay word referring to the frizzy hair of the natives. Others say it came from a Biak phrase, meaning the land below the sunset. Paraguay may come from the Payagua people, whose own name for themselves meant people of the river, or it may come from a Guarani phrase meaning feather crown of waters. Peru may be named after a native ruler, or it might come from the Quechua word for river. The Philippines is named after Philip II, King of Spain. The name Philip is of Greek origin and means lover of horses.
I love you!
The Philippine island of Luzon may get its name from a Tagalog word for a big wooden mortar used in the process of removing the husks from rice. Mindanao basically means land of the lakes. Cebu may derive from an ancient Proto-Philippine word meaning to bathe. Negros was given its name by the Spanish in reference to the dark-skinned natives there, but the original name meant cut off, as it was believed to have separated from a larger land. The name Panay comes from a word that refers to harvesting a kind of grass that grew there. Poland, the land of the Poles. The word comes from Polska, which is believed to derive from a Proto-Slavic word for field, which in turn stems from an ancient Proto-Indo-European word for flatland. Now, thanks to me reading the novel Quo Vadis, I learnt about the ancient people who dwelt in what's now Poland called Lygians. They may have been Germanic or Celtic, it isn't known, but their name might derive from the Celtic root for swamp or oath, or the Celtic god whose name may be linked to the oath definition, or another word meaning flashing light. Portugal's name comes from the Latin word for port and the more mysterious word Calle, Portus Calle, port of Calle. And who was Calle? Perhaps it comes from the name of a local Celtic tribe, the Calaeki. The Romans called the name Lusitania, a name that might have come from the Celtic god Lugus, which itself might derive from a word meaning to shine, or oath. This sounds like the Lygians again. Anyway, the Romans themselves said the land was named after the mythical companions of Bacchus, the god of wine, named Lusus and Lissa, whose names mean play and rage. So the Portuguese might have been the first Twitch streamers.
Rage quit.
Puerto Rico means rich port in Spanish, but it is also known by another name derived from the native Taino language, meaning land of the valiant lord. Qatar's name may refer to an old, easygoing system of commercial transaction, or perhaps to a word for camel caravan. Either way, a mercantile meaning is the result. Romania's name comes from the Latin for Roman. The Roman Empire was indeed present in Romania, and the Romanian language is classed as a Romance language that is descended from Latin. Before them, however, the land was inhabited by the Dacians, known by the Greeks as the Getae. The Greek historian Herodotus linked the Dacians with the Thracians. What the word Dacia means is contested, some arguing it comes from a word for wolf, or the word for knife, or from a word meaning to place or to put. The Romanian region known as Wallachia began as a name for a Celtic tribe, which in Proto-Germanic meant stranger. Russia's name is typically believed to derive from the Finnish word for the Swedes, and it was Swedish Vikings who journeyed east deep into the Slavic lands and gained control before becoming gradually Slavicized. The state they founded was called Rus. The Greek form of this word was Russia, and the Latin form was Ruthenia. The name Russia became the preferred designation in the 1500s during the reign of Tsar Ivan IV, known as the Terrible. Rwanda's name originates from an old Bantu verb for expanding or spreading out, and indeed a related word in the Zulu language means to multiply. St. Kitts and Nevis. The former is named after St. Christopher in English. The shortened version of the name Christopher is Kit. The name Christopher comes from Greek and means Christ-bearer, meaning someone who bears Christ in his soul. The native name for the island meant fertile land. Nevis is from the Spanish word for snow, in reference to an ancient miracle where it snowed in Rome in the summertime. St. Lucia is named after St. Lucia of Syracuse, an early Christian martyr. Its earlier Arawak name meant Land of the Iguanas. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The former is named after St. Vincent of Saragossa, who lived in the 3rd century. The name Vincent is Latin and means to conquer. The native Kalinago name for the island referred to a rainbow spirit who is believed to dwell there. The Grenadines are named after the Spanish city Granada, the etymology of which we've addressed already in this video. Samoa derives from a compound of two Samoan words that together mean sacred center or holy center. San Marino is named after St. Marinus, whose construction of a chapel in the region saw the formation of a community and later the nation that bears his name. Marinus is Latin and means of the sea. Sao Tome and Principe. The former is named after St. Thomas, the disciple of Jesus. The name Thomas is of Aramaic origin and means twin. Principe means prince and refers to the Prince of Portugal. Saudi Arabia is, as you see, made up of two words. Saudi comes from the House of Saud, a word which means prosperous, fortunate, happy, or lucky. Well, they certainly were after all that oil started paying off. Arabia comes from the Arab people, and the word has varying definitions, from a term meaning inhabitant of the desert to a word pertaining to clear speech, an exclusive tribal word meaning basically, we Arabs understand each other, we don't understand the speech of others. It isn't clear, unlike ours. The earliest attested appearance of the word is in Assyrian, from a root meaning west, and it may derive from a Semitic term pertaining to nomadism and wandering. Senegal is named after the Senegal River. It may originate from the name of a Berber tribe living north of the river, or perhaps the name of a local god along with the word for body of water, or it could perhaps have come from a Wolof phrase for our canoe. Serbia is named after its people, the Serbs. The most widely accepted origin for this name is a Proto-Slavic word that pertains to ally and kin and member of a tribe. Another view suggests a link to an Indo-European word meaning to protect or defend, but this can't be definitively proven. Seychelles was named after a French official, Jean Moreau de Seychelles. I couldn't find any reliable source for the origin of his surname, apart from a similarity with the French words for dry and dried. Sierra Leone's name is the Venetian form of the Portuguese phrase meaning Lion Mountains, which are not far from the capital city of Freetown. Singapore comes from the Malay rendering of a Sanskrit word meaning Lion City. Slovakia and Slovenia both mean land of the Slavs. The words Slovak and Slovene both stem from the ancient word for the Slav people, and this word Slav could in fact simply derive from the word for word, essentially meaning people who speak what we speak, people who speak our language. This theory is strengthened by the fact that the Slavs labeled the neighboring Germans silent or mute people, a people whose words could not be understood. Slav is also linguistically related to the word for glory, which derives from a Proto-Indo-European root. The Solomon Islands were named by the Spanish after the port city of Ophir, mentioned in the Bible and visited by the king of Israel Solomon. The Hebrew name Solomon, which means complete, comes from the word shalom, meaning peace. Somalia is believed to derive from an ancient progenitor of the nation. Others point to words having to do with milk, referencing the nation's widespread pastoralism. South Africa means South Africa. For the etymology of Africa, you can check my video on the name origin of continents, or you could just look it up for yourself. With South Korea, as with North Korea, the word Korea comes from Goryeo, which derived from an ancient kingdom, Goguryeo, meaning high castle. The word that South Koreans use to refer to their country translates literally to Empire of the Great Han, which refers to a confederation of 3 tribes, the name of which consists of the word for 3, and Han, meaning large, grand, or many. South Sudan. The word Sudan comes from an Arabic phrase, meaning land of the blacks. The name of Spain comes from Hispania, the Roman designation for the Iberian Peninsula. This in turn may derive from the Phoenician phrase, basically meaning land of rabbits. This theory gets some added credence from the Roman coins featuring Hadrian, who was born in Spain. And well, what do we have here?
What's up, Doc?
Another theory holds that the name derives from the ancient name for Seville, Hispalis, perhaps from an Iberian or Celtic root, or perhaps it was a derivation of the Greek Heliopolis, city of the sun. Sri Lanka means resplendent island, but it's had a bunch of other names in its history. A legendary prince is said to have named the island after its copper-red soil. The Tamil word for the island may have referred to an alcoholic drink produced there. The Persians and Arabs called the island Serendip, perhaps meaning Golden Isle, and the origin of the English word serendipity. Another name for Sri Lanka was Ceylon, which entered English from Portuguese and which came from the Sanskrit word for lion. Sudan, as mentioned earlier, comes from the Arabic for land of the blacks, but long before the Arab invasion, the land was known as Nubia, from the Egyptian word for gold. Another name for the land was Tarseti, in reference to the Nubian nation's skill in archery. Suriname's name may have originated from an indigenous tribe, but the first European sources link it to the Suriname River, but the true meaning is unknown. Sweden, land of the Swedes, originally referred to this part of the modern nation, but the meaning of the word itself is believed to stem from the Proto-Indo-European root, basically meaning one's own, in the sense of belonging, as in one's own kinsman or tribesman. This same root is seen in the Germanic tribe of the Suebi, who gave their name to Swabia. Switzerland, land of the Swiss, which originally referred to someone from this town and the countryside around it. The word, as rendered in Old High German, may be associated with the verb meaning to burn, perhaps referring to slash and burn agriculture, clearing forests for habitation. Others prefer a Proto-Celtic root for this kind of clearance. Still used today is the Roman name for this land, Helvetia, named after the Helvetii, a Celtic people whose name is typically translated rich in land, and it certainly is beautiful land. The name of Syria, one view holds, can be traced back to the name of Assyria, which indeed ruled much of the modern nation of Syria. The word refers to the god Ashur, whose name may derive from the root word meaning to advance or to progress. Aram was the name for much of inland Syria and comes from a root meaning high, as in highlands or highlanders. Taiwan's name seems to date to the 17th century and initially referred to a sandbank peninsula, Tai meaning terraced and Wan meaning bay, the name of which ended up applying to the whole island. The Portuguese name for Taiwan was Formosa, meaning beautiful. Tajikistan, land of the Tajiks. Now, while this name is the Middle Persian word for an Arab tribe, the Tajiks themselves as a people are believed to be Iranian. According to the Muslim scholar Al-Tabri, the name of that Arab tribe stemmed from its progenitor, whose name meant to plaster, because he was believed to have been the first person to plaster the walls of a well. Seems pretty random, but I guess wells are very important in the desert. Tanzania's name was made by combining the names of the two regions that joined to form it as a modern state, Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Tanganyika means sail in the wilderness in Swahili, and in the Luvali language it means stars. Zanzibar comes from an Arabic term for the East African coast, where they used to extensively operate. This name may have derived from the Greek word Azania for an East African coastal region. It may have been the Doric Greek name for Zeus, or perhaps the Somali word for nose, meaning the Horn of Africa. Thailand. The word Thai means free man and may have stemmed from an older word simply meaning person. The older name for the country, Siam, may come from the Sanskrit for dark, or the Mon word for stranger, or even from the Pali phrase meaning land of gold. Timor-Leste. The former word means east in Malay. The latter word means east in Portuguese. East, east. That name is Easter than the Easter Bunny. At least the native name is more specific. East, where the sun rises. Togo's name in the Ewe language means behind the river, nice and easy. Tonga means south, in reference to its main island being south of other Tongan islands and many other Polynesian islands. An early name given by Europeans was the Friendly Islands, because of the kind and hospitable reception the natives gave to Captain Cook. Trinidad means Trinity in Spanish and was coined by Columbus. The native name for it probably simply meant island, though it is popularly believed to have been named Land of the Hummingbird, which of course sounds a lot nicer. Now, Tobago may have been named after the tobacco that grew on the island, or perhaps because it was shaped like a cigar. Indigenous names for it included Black Conch and Big Snail. Tunisia is named after its capital, which derives from a Berber root meaning encampment, though it might instead be named after the goddess of wisdom, Tanit, whom the Carthaginians worshipped. The word in Berber meant spring or stream. The name of Turkey as we know it simply means land of the Turks. The word Turk itself appears to mean strong, ripe, or vigorous, but in terms of being the name of a people group, its origin is not known. It may have come from an ancient word meaning born or created. The old Chinese name for the Turks, who were then living in their homeland in the Altai mountain region, meant helmet, perhaps in reference to the shape of the mountains where they lived. For Turkmenistan, meaning land of the Turkmen, well, we've just looked at the word Turk, so we'll just add that the Muslim scholar Ibn Kathir believed the name Turkmen was a compound of the word Turk and the Arabic word Iman, meaning belief or faith, in reference to the 10th century conversion of the Turkmen to Islam. Tuvalu means 8 standing together in the native language, referencing its 8 inhabited islands. Uganda is named after the Buganda kingdom and ultimately derives from a Proto-Bantu word for family. Ukraine comes from an old Slavic word for edge or borderland. The root has the implication of cutting or dividing. It has also been argued, from the basis of Church Slavonic, that it means a definite region, one that has been carved out. The United Arab Emirates are named after 7 emirates that joined to form a single state. The word emirate comes from emir, an Arabic word for prince or ruler. The name of Dubai or Dubai is uncertain, proposals ranging from its meaning money to its meaning young locust. Abu Dhabi means father of gazelle. United Kingdom means United Kingdom, but let's address the various names associated with it. First, the island of Great Britain. The Romans called it Britannia, land of the Britons, the ancient Celtic people of the island, whom the Greeks called Bretonoi. This derived from the old Brittonic language's word Britanni, a word that possibly meant the painted ones, which could further be linked to the Latin word for the Picts, painted people, especially considering the old Welsh word for the Picts. Another ancient name for Britain was Albion, mentioned in Greek sources and in Roman sources. The Celtic root of this word refers to earth and land, but it could also derive from the Proto-Indo-European word for white, likely in reference to the White Cliffs of Dover, which certainly would have been what the ancient Greek sailors who visited the land saw. Now, England. The word England comes from Engleland, land of the Angles, a Germanic tribe who, along with the Saxons and Jutes, migrated to and settled in the land after the Roman withdrawal. The Angles are believed to have been named after their homeland, the Anglian Peninsula. The word may have come from a Germanic root for narrow, in reference to the narrow estuary dividing the Anglian Peninsula from the Schwanzen Peninsula. Or perhaps it comes from the Proto-Indo-European word for bend or hook, as in angling, referencing the shape of the peninsula, or simply that fishing was a major industry the people were engaged in. Scotland comes from the Latin word Scotia, for land of the Scoti, the Scots, which was the Latin name for the Celtic Gaels. The Latin term originally referred to Ireland, and the Gaels did indeed invade and settle in Pictish lands in Britain from Ireland, and the name of Scoti began to shift in location from Ireland to what's now Scotland. The word Gael, member of the Gaelic or Gaelic peoples, comes from an old Irish word whose original meaning might have been forest people or wild men, and I mean no one's arguing with that. But the word Scot in Scotland, what does that mean? One scholar suggested it might come from the Gaelic word for outcast, perhaps meaning that the Gaels who sailed to Britain were outcasts, or simply that they were now geographically cut off from them. I don't think this is likely, however, since the name of Scotia or Scotia is mentioned in Latin sources as a name for Ireland decades before the Scoti invaded Britain around the mid-4th century mark. However, the basic Proto-Indo-European root of the word, Scot, meaning simply to cut, may be the best candidate for the word's origin, though Scots complaining about the weather may prefer the other root, meaning dark and gloomy. On to Wales. The name springs from an old English rendering of a Proto-Germanic word for a Celtic tribe in Gaul. This tribe's name appears to originate from the Gaulish word for hawk, which is quite similar to the Welsh word for hawk. Anyway, the Welsh name for Wales, Cymru, simply means countryman. With Northern Ireland, we've already addressed the name of Ireland, but Northern Ireland is situated within an Irish region known as Ulster. This word derives from its ancient inhabitants, who were perhaps mentioned by Ptolemy in his book on geography. The name possibly stemming from the Gaelic word for beard. The second half of the word may come from the Irish word for earth or country. Beardland. United States of America. Right, what does America mean? Of course, the accepted explanation for the name's origin is that it comes from the first name of Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. You take the name, make it Latin, and then feminize it, and bingo, America. While the name Amerigo is Italian, it appears to derive from the Proto-Germanic word for hard work or struggle, or the word for home, and then the word for king or ruler, the home ruler or the striving king. Now, an alternate theory from the English antiquarian Alfred Hudd is that the name America comes from the name of Richard Emmerich, an Anglo-Welsh merchant who may have supported the America-directed voyage of explorer John Cabot. Hudd argued that Cabot named the American landmass after Americ. The name was added to maps, since lost, but cartographers a decade later, unfamiliar with the merchant, mistakenly attributed the name to Vespucci. The Cabot roll, commercial documents for the years 1496 to 99 from the port of Bristol, mentions Americ's name and Cabot's name in close proximity, and is an important piece of evidence for the theory. But it is not enough to convince most scholars. Uruguay gets its name from the Uruguay River, a word which may come from a native Guarani phrase linking the words for river and bird. This Uruguayan poet translated it rather beautifully, if a tad fancifully, as the river of the painted birds. Uzbekistan, land of the Uzbeks. All theories as to the origin of this word involve the Turkic word for ruler or leader. The country could very well be named after a person, namely Oguzbek, a legendary ruler of the Oghuz Turks, the word Oghuz simply meaning tribe ruler. Vanuatu comes from two words, Vanua, meaning land or home, and tu, from Proto-Oceanic, meaning to stand, and it is typically translated as our land or our land forever. The word Vatican gets its name from the hill in Rome where it is situated. The origin of the name itself is disputed. One theory posits that it derives from two Latin words, one for prophet or seer, and another meaning to foretell, sing, or prophesy. Venezuela is believed to have been named after the city of Venice, after Vespucci beheld the native stilt houses on the water in the country's north. The word Venice comes from its ancient inhabitants, the Veneti, a word whose Proto-Indo-European root means to wish, to strive, to love, same root as Venus, the goddess of love. Vietnam. The word Viet comes from Yue and is believed to originate from a Proto-Sino-Tibetan word meaning to travel, though it is also rendered in Old Chinese as battle axe, and this word became attached to a people group dwelling in what's now southern China and northern Vietnam. The word Nam, meanwhile, means south, so Vietnam means the Viet people of the south. Yemen may also get its name from the direction of south, here meaning the south of the Arabian Peninsula, but it might also derive from the names for blessed, in reference to the quality of its land compared to most of Arabia. Indeed, the Romans called Yemen Arabia Felix, meaning fortunate or happy Arabia. Zambia is named after the Zambezi River. The word Zambezi may simply mean great or grand river, or it might combine a word for river with the name of the Mbiza people, meaning the river of the Bisa people. Zimbabwe's name comes from the medieval Shona capital city of the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe. The name means houses of stone, in reference to the kingdom's grand, dry stone masonry architecture. And that, my friend, is what the whole world means. And it's rather telling that we don't actually know for sure the meaning of most of it. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye!